Buildings Academy podcast. I'm your host today, Matt Scott, and this will be episode 498. Welcome to the Smart Buildings Academy podcast. Today's episode will be about the true cost of Band-Aid fixes in building operations. All the information covered in this episode can be found on our website at podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/498. That's podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/498. So today, we're going to be talking about the true costs of Band-Aid fixes in building operations. You know, the ones that just get your building running. Those kind of tricks that just keep things moving temporarily, right? So let me ask you something. Have you ever duct taped insulation back in place? Or overridden a BAS alarm for a week or so? Or maybe you zip tied a VAV damper arm instead of actually fixing the actuator. Don't worry, you're not alone. But here's the catch. These shortcuts do come at a cost. Not just financially, but operationally, reputationally, and even safety related. So buckle in, because we're going to be exploring the topics of what a Band-Aid fix really is and why they happen, the hidden and long-term costs that they create, the cultural and organizational habits that fuel them, real numbers to illustrate their true impact, and how to break that cycle. So let's dive in. Let's first talk about what a Band-Aid fix is. So a Band-Aid fix is any quick, temporary solution to a system or piece of equipment that treats the symptom without addressing the root cause. It's often cheap, fast, and appealing in that moment. However, it rarely holds up over time. Let's give a few examples. For one, maybe we have a chilled water pump that trips offline. Instead of investigating why, the tech resets it and just walks away. Or maybe we have an occupancy sensor that fails in a conference room, and instead of replacing it, someone just installs a toggle switch. Or maybe your economizer's outside air damper is stuck open in December, and that fix is just to wire it shut. Any of those sound familiar? The truth is, these actions often feel like wins, right? You got the system back online, you stopped the complaints, you bought yourself some time. But what you really did was start a timer. These Band-Aids become part of the building's DNA, and as they accumulate or build up, they transform that well-designed facility that you had into a Frankenstein system of mismatches, overrides, and guesswork. Now, we are calling this a Band-Aid fix, right? So it stops the bleeding, which is a scary thought. Let's talk about some reasons why the building might really start bleeding. One would be the amount of energy wasted. So Band-Aid fixes often force systems to run inefficiently. For example, an overridden VFD might be running at full speed 24/7. Or a hot water loop loses control because the valve feedback is lost. What's the result of that? Skyrocketing utility bills, right? I've seen buildings with energy intensity that's 20 to 30% higher than similar facilities, just because of these inefficiencies. Another way that we might see some bleeding in our building is premature wear and tear. So let's say you bypass a safety limit on a rooftop unit just to keep the fan running. That fan is now operating under unsafe conditions. And basically, what you've done is set a path for early failure. Well, then what? Fixing the motor? That's going to be pretty expensive. What about replacing the entire rooftop unit? Even worse. Obviously, this all results into some cascading problems, right? One band-aid fix will lead to another. So let's say you override one zone, and that impacts airflow to a neighboring zone. Now that zone overheats, so you cool it with portable units. Now we've got an electrical panel that's overloaded, and on and on and on. It's like building dominoes. We also have that invisible labor drain. So every time we have a quick fix, it might seem easy until you count how many times you've had to revisit it. So techs will keep responding to those same alarms. They reset the same equipment every week. That's labor you're already paying for, but you're really not getting much lasting value from it. We also run the risk of being non-compliant. Think of our indoor air quality sensors, maybe our carbon monoxide alarms, emergency lighting, or smoke control systems. Band-aid fixes in those areas, our life safety system areas, aren't just costly, they can also be pretty dangerous. So you have your OSHA, NFPA, or ASHRAE, our local code. They all have compliant expectations. So temporary workarounds might get you in pretty hot water during inspections or audits. So you got to be careful of that. And then also, where we might see some bleeding is user experience damage. So if we have tenants and building occupants that don't care why it's cold or stuffy, they care that it is, right? So comfort complaints will just pile up, and then that productivity drops, and then maybe it's harder to renew a lease. All because someone zip-tied a damper in place 6 months ago. So why do these band-aids keep happening? Well, for one, it's time pressure. I'd say the number one reason is urgency. You're under the gun, people are complaining, you don't have your parts, you're short-staffed, so you just kind of have to patch it and go and hope for the best, right? Another reason is culture norms. A lot of times in many buildings, there's a weird sense of pride in being the hero tech, the MacGyver of sorts, right? The guy who can fix anything with a screwdriver and a wire nut. But that hero mentality often undermines our actual sustainable practices. Another reason why we have Band-Aid fixes is lack of training, proper training, I might add. Sometimes the techs just don't know the root cause or how to identify it. So they fix what they can and not what's really broken. If they can't see it, they can't fix it, right? Another reason is a feedback loop. So maybe we have people who are trying to approve these budgets, and they rarely hear how much reactive maintenance costs, and man hours, lost energy, and tenant dissatisfaction. There's no feedback to give them so that they can understand what the budget's really going to cost. And then sometimes we run into documentation gaps. One of the scariest things is when a building is full of undocumented fixes. Nobody knows which VAVs are manually overridden. And again, it's that Frankenstein thing where some are working, some are not, some are having this manual override. And nobody remembers who bypassed the HU freestat. When it's operational debt, eventually you'll have to pay for it. All right, let's talk about the financial impact. Let's walk through the numbers. Let's go with scenario A, that chiller patch job. So costs temporary glycol addition plus reset plus overtime costs about 3,500. It happens what, 3 times per year, and let's go with 5 years in that lifespan. That's $52,500. What do you think it would cost for a full upgrade of a glycol system? Maybe 40,000. So you've paid more for the Band-Aid over time than an actual cure or replacement. Now, what about scenario B that I talked about, where we have that BAS alarm overridden? Let's say the system runs constantly. That adds about 8,000 maybe in energy use a year. Let's say that we just deferred that sensor replacement. That cost is going to be about 1,800. So over 3 years, we've lost about 24,000. The real kicker is that the sensor is ignored, and eventually that leads to mold due to improper humidity control, which I'm sure you're guessing will, add tens of thousands in remediation of that mold. So of course you want to be careful with that. What about an energy benchmarking example? So let's say the average building EUI, or energy use intensity, for your type of building is about 75 kBTU per square feet. So your facility is running at 92. That's about a 17-point delta. That's mainly because of operational inefficiencies, and most of them are rooted in reactive behavior and Band-Aid fixes. Very costly, right? Now, I do want to throw this out here before we move on. Maybe the most dangerous cost of all isn't energy, it's not labor or replacement parts, it's normalization, or normalizing this Band-Aid fix as the solution. When Band-Aid fixes become the standard, we really stop questioning them. So that chiller that needs reset every Monday, it kind of gets thought as, that's just what we do. Wait, you've got to kick the HU to get it running? Well, she's old, but she works. That mindset is lethal to performance because it numbs your team. It doesn't let them be proactive. It makes them be reactive. And it conditions them to accept that there's a lot of dysfunction as part of their job. And even worse, it makes your building less resilient. So when a major crisis hits, so whether it's a power outage or a weather event or a sensor failure, you're not working from a place of stability. You're just hoping for the best and hoping that patchwork holds on. Hope is not a strategy. It's time to rewrite that playbook, and I'm going to tell you how in this next section. So now that we know what the problem is, what do we do about it? Well, one, we really need to focus on building a preventative maintenance culture. So what does that mean? Well, preventative maintenance isn't just a checklist work. It's where we have real operational excellence. So we need to make sure that we're tracking recurring alarms, override logs, and equipment failure frequency. From here, these patterns will tell you where deeper problems live within your system. So in our BAS, we can use trends and reports to go back and troubleshoot and also look in to what might be going on. So if we're seeing one area or one zone is being overheated and we're using a lot of energy in that area over time, and we see these the same issue keep coming up, we're obviously losing a lot of energy or wasting a lot of energy here. So if we're tracking that or trending it, we'll kind of know where the preventative maintenance is maybe lacking and not just having it as a checklist. We got to look at those patterns and really understand where maybe deeper problems live, right? That goes back to that Band-Aid fix. It's addressing what we might see. However, it's not addressing the root cause. Another big thing is investing in technician training. We see this a lot. A lot of times our techs or our maintenance team isn't necessarily trained as properly as you might think. Now, they're obviously very well and capable of using drills, screwdrivers, and fixing problems, but a lot of times it's on the principle of Band-Aid fixes. They're just used to fixing them just to get the system up and running again. It seems to be the more focused thing to have a operational building as opposed to a functional and efficient building, which again might seem all and well. However, down the line, it's going to be way more costly. So investing in that training is also crucial. You want to be able to give your teams the tools to troubleshoot deeply, right? We need to invest in diagnostics training so that they can go back and diagnose what a real issue might be or a root cause. We need them to understand airflow balancing, the test and balance process. We also want to make sure that they have BACnet awareness for our BAS and understand all of the IP addressing, and really just whatever might help trace back the problems upstream, right? Another key aspect, and we preach this a lot at Smart Buildings Academy, is leveraging our smart BAS tools, really using our BAS to its full capabilities. Now, modern analytics really help that, right? These platforms can identify root causes. We can have fault detections. Anytime we have a fault, it detects us and alarms us or alerts us. We have trend analysis, which I kind of mentioned, but we have basically a bunch of data points that point to some issue that we can go back and find that root cause. And then we can, even with modern analytics, come up with some predictive alerts based on, the AHU running 24/7 or our VFD fan. It might be able to predict that it's going to fail because it's being overused. Or maybe we have some short cycling and it's going to predict some humidity issues. With us being able to use our smart BAS, it's, really helpful understanding root causes and not just having those Band-Aid fixes. Another help or way to help our Band-Aid fixes is documenting everything. I mentioned one of the issues is that a lot of times we have, VAVs that are in manual mode and we don't know which ones are which. If you document that, at least when something happens, you can go back and say, hey, this is what happened. And you actually have a document or a documentation of that. We can actually create a digital override log within our BAS. We can establish protocols, which means that anytime anything's overridden, it must be logged out, logged, and reviewed weekly. We can even come up with a Google sheet. That's better than nothing. Any way we can document what's going on in our building and what fixes we've done or Band-Aid fixes would really help. So make sure you document everything. If that doesn't work, make sure you tell your story to leadership. You go as high as you can, and that way the people who make the decisions, can help make better decisions, right? So you want to communicate that in financial terms. So maybe you're telling them that the VFD might cost us $8,000 this year, or fixing this one time will eliminate 12 repeat calls per month. And I think they can do the math on the labor on how many times that's going to come, or somebody's going to be coming out there. So making a case with data is always the best way to come up with a real fix, or to improve those band-aid fixes, if you will. So let's wrap this up with a couple different conclusions on band-aid fixes, right? So band-aid fixes definitely feel easier. They're very tempting. And I mean, sometimes, let's be honest, they are necessary, very short term necessary, but they should never be your ultimate goal or your overall strategy. The longer you defer the real fixes, the more money you lose, right? We talked about that over time. If you have somebody coming out 3 times a year for 5 years, and that costs more than replacing an entire system, like a glycol system for our chiller, we want to make sure that we, save money. Also, again, the longer you defer those real fixes, we also see all of the unstable problems that come up in our system, that Frankenstein effect. If you have some well-designed system that are supposed to work together and be this nice flowed operational system, it becomes a lot harder and more unstable the more different items get band-aid fixes that are not the way that this system is supposed to be running based on design specs. And really, I think it also is harder, or the harder it is to win support for real improvement. So the longer you wait on those real fixes, the harder it becomes to get somebody or higher up to help with real improvement. I mean, if they just keep seeing band-aid fixes, it's not going to really sell the cause, right? So when you're thinking about your building operation and those band-aid fixes, here's a couple challenges. Walk your building next week. Know every override, patch, or shortcut. Document all of those. Put them in a Google spreadsheet or some sort of log. Then I want you to calculate the cost. So that's your labor, energy usage, maybe the risk of what could happen if something goes wrong from those band-aid fixes. And then I want you to build your case and share it. I want you to add that all up and really understand what might be happening if you don't find the root cause problem. Now remember, a truly high-performing building isn't the one with the least complaints. I think that's something we really need to point out. It's not that we don't want someone to complain, but we need to make sure that we're not just focusing on complaints, but it's the one that doesn't even notice the system at all. It's just like anything else in life. If we don't notice it, obviously it's working, right? If our building or our house has a foundation that isn't shifting and we don't notice anything, obviously that's the way it's designed and nobody complains. Not only do they not complain, they don't even notice it. So a truly high-performing building isn't the one with the least amount of complaints. It's the one where no one notices the system at all. I just want to say that again because it's a really good thought. So thanks for sticking with me on this operation-focused episode. I'll be back next week with more insights. So thank you for listening to the Smart Buildings Academy podcast. We hope you learned a lot from this episode. If you found this episode valuable, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're watching this on LinkedIn, please share this with your network. As always, this episode will be available on our website at podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/498. That's podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/498. Thanks again, and until next time, keep your building smarter.